Welcome everybody to this Around the World session for our Genesis 2020 conference. This one in particular will be about labour pool development. Now I'm going to hand you over to Anne, who will introduce you to herself and our esteemed panel who we are delighted to have join us today. So over to you, Anne.
Thanks a lot, Jasmine. Great to be here. Great to see all of you. My name is Anne Bailey. I am the CEO of an organization called Form the Future, and we're all about helping young people make informed decisions about their future careers, while also building a talent pipeline for our local businesses. Because I'm based here in Cambridge, England, life science is a really big business for us and big opportunities, but also we're aware of the big skills needs of the industry. So really happy to be here taking part in this conversation, which I think is an important one. And actually, I just wanted to sort of set the scene by quoting Tony Jones from One Nucleus, who says, "Success of any venture, project, or policy depends heavily on employing the right people with the right skills at the right time." And I think this just couldn't be more important. I also just wanted to quote from a document I'm sure Jackie you'll be wanting to refer to as well, but the Science Industry Partnership Life Sciences 2030 Skills Strategy for the UK, which you actually shared with me. It has some fascinating information in it, including the fact that we are anticipating adding 133,000 jobs over the next 10 years, both new from growth, but also replacement. So huge amount of growth needed for our industry. And that figure was pre-pandemic. So I'm not sure whether that's even changed since then, but I'm sure we'll be coming on to it. Clearly, there's been a huge amount of change in the life sciences sector. And that rapid change means that it's hard to plan or even anticipate what skills we'll need exactly in the coming years. So, and meanwhile, as the industry diversifies, you're actually coming into more competition for talent from, particularly the need for digital. There are others looking for them too. So I think it's a really interesting, challenging, but also quite exciting time to be talking about skills and talent and growth for the sector. So that's the background. I thought we could kick off with just doing a little introduction from each of you, who you are, where you come from, and really why are you here today? What does this all mean to you? So if I can, I'm going to go in the order that you're on my screen. Nikki, this is me starting with you. Would you kick us off, please?
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everybody, for the invite to join the panel this afternoon. So I am Nikki Gain, and I am part of Cytiva. For those of you who don't know Cytiva, because we've only existed since April 2020, Cytiva was formerly part of GE Healthcare Life Sciences, and we were formed after a divestiture to the Danaher company. And Cytiva is a global provider of technologies and services that advance and accelerate the very therapeutics that they're working on. For example, we're very heavily working with companies with both COVID diagnostics and COVID vaccines. But my role in Cytiva is customer digital education lead. And we've been looking since about 2018 into the needs of our existing customers who are life scientists, but also those looking to become life scientists. Where are they going to find their training and their education? And we saw that needed to be a digital experience, that it needed to be an on-demand e-learning experience. So we're trying to understand how we, as if you like, a trusted supplier to life scientists, can also help them with their education and training journey.
Great, thank you. How about you, Ashley? Would you like to go next?
Yes, sure. And I was going to say good morning, but I realize it's not morning there. We're still having coffee here. I'm Ashley Cagle. I am the Vice President of Economic Development for Wake County Economic Development, which is located in North Carolina. We're on the eastern seaboard of the United States, and a lot of people know our area from the Research Triangle Park. In my role, I oversee all of our business recruitment and expansion for the area. And as part of that, I focus on our talent strategies and solutions. So we have had a tremendous amount of success in growing specifically our life science industry. And that doesn't happen without a lot of attention paid to talented people. We are anchored by 3 Tier 1 research universities, which we're fortunate to have, but a lot of alignment has to happen in order for that to really pay off in the way that we need it to. So I spend a lot of time engrossed in talent and workforce development as part of my role.
Great. Wow, fascinating, and glad to have one of a fellow American in the session. So Jackie, over to you.
Hello there. Yes, I'm Jackie Hall. I head up the early careers team in research and development at AstraZeneca. So that really means that I have all of the large early talent programs in R&D under my wing. So the postdoctoral program, the apprentices, the graduate program, and we also have a role coordinating some of the PhDs and the placement students as well. In other roles, Anne's already alluded to this. I'm very involved in the Science Industry Partnership and actually have been leading the Futures Group this year as they put together an action plan and a bid for government to deliver the 2030 Life Sciences Skills Strategy. And I'm also a member of the BBSRC People and Talent Strategy Advisory Panel as well. So I think as I sort of come to the discussion today and just reflect a little bit on this, I guess my sort of reason for being here would be to say, although I think as a life sciences sector and as a life sciences industry, we do have some skills challenges, there's no doubt. I think we've also got a huge amount of opportunity and in so many ways, much more perhaps at the moment than other industries, clearly as we've risen to the fore through the pandemic. But also, even before that, having very strong support, I think, of government, certainly in the UK. And there is lots of opportunity and lots of things we can do, I think, to help solve some of the challenges that we have. And also particularly interested in thinking about how we can work more closely with education and with academia, because I think some of the challenges we have start much earlier. So I think that's something else we can think about and talk about today.
Perfect. Great. Brilliant. I absolutely agree with the point about opportunity. You know, it really, the recent times has really shown us, you know, we'll look at that in a moment, I'm sure. But yeah, so next over to you, Quinn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much and good afternoon. So yes, my name is Quinn Tudor. I'm the Chief Executive of MediWales. MediWales is the life science network organisation for Wales. And so as a result, we tend to be bringing together academic, business and clinical organisations. We're industry-led, but as the nature of our industry dictates, we spend an awful lot of time working with universities and with clinical institutions in collaborative projects, but also in discussions about skills development. And in Wales, that means skills around medical technology, diagnostics, pharmaceutical supply chain, and increasingly digital. So digital skills, I think, is something that we might come up to in today's conversation, because it is definitely an emerging need. Skills is always something that comes up as a priority for our members, alongside regulation and international trade and market access. Skills is always up there as a priority, and in that respect, we do find ourselves working, advising with universities in Wales to try and meet the needs of industry, while also meeting the academic requirements of the various courses that deliver the new core of graduates to our sector.
Great, thank you. Well, it's always good to start with defining the problem potentially, you know. So, and although Jackie's, you know, encouraged us to be hopeful, and I always want to be hopeful, it's also good to sort of get to grip with why this is a challenge. Why are we talking about this? So would anyone want to kick off with what you see as being the current challenges amongst life sciences companies when it comes to skills? And I appreciate the life sciences industry is broad, and these skills will vary. But Jackie, could I actually ask you to kick us off with that discussion?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think you touched on some of it already, Anne, and the sort of, in one sense, it's actually just, I think, the sheer numbers that we're going to need, when you look over the next sort of 10 or 20 years, and that comes through, growth in the sector and new technologies, but also, as you mentioned, from replacement roles and from, sort of retirement as well. So I think there's that. One challenge is just simply scale. But on top of that, of course, we are at the forefront of technology, and certainly things like digital AI, machine learning are throwing new challenges into the mix. And I think increasingly we find we need people with those interdisciplinary skills, those who can work across the interface of biology, for example, and digital. And also, in those areas where we're actually not just competing within life sciences, but again, I think you alluded to it, we're competing with the banking sector and with the technology sector and the tech giants as well. So that definitely is a challenge. But there are also some areas, I think, that for some time, I think we've been aware that there's a shortage of skills. Sort of things like regulatory affairs and clinical pharmacology, things that have been well documented by the ABPI and by the Science Industry Partnership. And I think we've made some progress in that, but there's a lot more that we can do. Some of that's probably driven by the fact that we always want people with experience, but maybe the writing on the wall is actually we have to grow some of that experience. So I'll stop there and let others comment as well.
So actually, Quinn, would you like to come in on that? You sort of alluded to some of the skills challenges in your introduction.
Yes. Well, I guess, I mean, some of them have been there. I mean, I've been running this organization for about 18 years now, and a lot of the skills challenges haven't changed, whereas the specific skills, the move to digital, and the keeping up to date with the science and the technology advancements have changed the nature of the skills required. There's always been a tension between strong academic education and the needs of companies. We have company representatives who want to see graduates coming out of university with good project management skills, with sound business knowledge, with one that keeps coming up in the biotech and the pharmaceutical world in my area is laboratory skills, good basic laboratory skills for our scientists, and technical skills in other sectors, and as Jacqueline has already mentioned, regulatory skills, the ability to, if not understand regulation to the level that you would expect a regulatory expert to be, understanding the subject, these graduates should understand the need for regulatory compliance and be able to navigate through it. But I also know from talking to our academic colleagues that on the other side of the equation, there's a requirement to get through the syllabus, to get the basic modules done and get them done to a level where they can get certification from their various royal colleges and certification bodies. So I know there's a tension that the students are in the middle of in terms of delivering. Sorry for the phone there. Delivering the right skills for business and delivering the right curriculum for education.
Ashley, do you want to come in? And is it the same across the pond, as we say over here in the UK?
Yes, I'll say it's painfully the same. I was hoping to hear something a little bit different, but it sounds like the struggles definitely transcend. So, I'll say to a point that Jackie was making, what we find, because we're not just fortunately strong in life sciences, but we've grown a nice technology sector here. In addition to, agriculture has always been our primary industry, but all companies are really becoming technology companies, which creates a whole new baseline need for skills and a whole sort of new level of competition amongst industries. So we see that reflected in some of the recruiting and retention struggles that some of our companies are having. We also have noted that a lot of our life science companies are seeing a higher turnover of their employees as they try to advance their own careers. So we see the companies who are really investing in training from within and growing their own talent pipeline being more successful in terms of retention, the ones who are really investing in the skills growth of their employees. There is something to be said for the competition factor of paying someone more and that being a recruitment strategy, but ultimately it's not a long-term strategy. So we really see the investments in people paying off well for our companies. Also, we have a whole generation retiring. Our baby boomer generation is exiting the workforce and taking a lot of historical knowledge with them. And so training from within has never been more important. Lastly, I'll just note we recently completed a study, an employer study, asking companies across 10 different industry sectors what their skills needs were going to be over the next 3 years. And it's quite interesting to see that across all industry sectors in our region, soft skills remain some of the most needed. Critical thinking, problem solving, regardless of industry, we're at the top of the list, and that's probably not a surprise. But we also saw the emergence of this new skill set that we hadn't noted before, and it came through more in the comments of the survey, which was companies are looking for employees with empathy and who accept diversity and can work cross-functionally. And so there's also this, I call human skill set that seems to be emerging that hasn't been noted before. And so that was interesting to see in our survey. And I think one of the ways that companies are going to get on top of these challenges is to embrace other levels of education and experience, and then take more responsibility of training from within once they are there. And that includes soft skills training. There's no perfect employee, of course. And so I think the bottom line of my comments here is I think the more investment in existing employees, the more payoff we're going to see, and less issues around retention and competition.
That's great. And Nikki, that's very much your space, isn't it? Is, how do we train people within the organizations to presumably develop, enroll, but also maybe to give them that support such that they stay in the companies?
Yeah, absolutely. Is what skills can we as a life science company and also a supplier to life science companies, how can we build a skill set of our own employees, but also those of companies like, for example, AstraZeneca. And I really did reflect on the point that Jackie made, and also Quinn, I think Ashley touched on it as well, where the employers are asking for a certain skill set, and the challenge is then for the universities, colleges to deliver on that. But I think Jackie actually mentioned it herself as well, was maybe we as life science companies need to step in and say, okay, let us partner with you, let us help you bring our experience as life science companies to work with your current PhD students, even your undergraduates, and explain to them what it means to be a good project manager, what it means to work in an environment that's very diverse. What does it mean to, what is the difference? For example, this is one area, I'm quite interested in, having come through this journey myself, albeit many decades ago. I learned my cell culture actually in university in Cardiff, and then I moved to a life science company, and all of a sudden it wasn't just the ability to grow the cells and do the experiment. It was I going to be able to do this in 2 or 3 years time? And when it was scaled up to a manufacturing process, had I selected the right reagents, and that they could still be making and growing these cells equally as well when it became a production process. And of course, I wouldn't have learned that at university. I had to learn it on the job. But this is an area where I think we can certainly start as life science companies. Maybe working more closely with universities, with companies like with institutions like MediWales, and Form for the Future to help build out those learning curriculums and actually providing the content, the educational content ourselves.
I think it's I actually want to ask the question, which is really close to my heart, is how do we attract people into the industry? Attraction is so important, and where does that need to start? Because yes, a lot of them will need to go all the way through university, and maybe it's about fishing in the pool of graduates. But does it need to start sooner? Do we make sure they're choosing courses at the right stage so that they've got those options? Really, I'm curious to know what you all think. Are we enthusing the next generation of life scientists? Who'd like to kick off with this?
Well, can I pick up on that, Anne? Because I actually also wanted to just come back on something that Ashley mentioned as well, which I think was all around retention. And I think you mentioned that when you invest in people, basically they're much more likely to stay and you're likely to retain them. And the word that's been on my lips as we've kind of gone around this discussion is apprentices, because, and I think, Anne, this also speaks to your question, how do we get them in, how do we enthuse them? But I mean, certainly we've had great success in bringing in apprentices into science in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, and they are probably the most enthusiastic group of employees within our organisation. It's been very interesting this year as we've run sort of the company pulse surveys, which look at employee engagement, in a year where I think in general the scores were extremely high and everybody's been sort of very driven and realised why they're there. The scores for the apprentices were just off the scale in terms of engagement and enthusiasm, and so I think there's a lot to be said for that. They are extreme. If you can get them in, not all necessarily young, actually, because we take up older apprentices as well, but it's something to do with the career stage and the development, I think, that's really key.
I think it's the fact that you're investing in them, and it's a sort of, there's a real sense of mutual gratitude for the opportunity. They're serving a function, they're performing for you, but at the same time, you're helping them build themselves, develop their career. So I've heard that often, that the loyalty factor is so much greater with those apprentices, or where you've helped them grow their career. I'm just curious, is anyone else here involved in apprenticeships and perhaps attracting from school leavers or, at those earlier stages?
Well, a long time ago, I have a background in working in a university alongside the knowledge transfer partnerships, which are for the benefit of people who are not based in the UK. It is a government program for matching high quality graduates with posts in industry to then do a period of training and work experience combined, working on a specific project. So drawing on that experience, I know that there are apprenticeships, and then there are other programs available sporadically and regionally, but I know a lot of the efforts made to embed students and graduates into companies are very valuably received, and my experience is that they produce better quality, well-rounded, trained individuals in terms of their careers and their work, in that they are now able to contextualize the learning that they have in the university in an industry setting, and I know that pays dividends for them as well as the company in their future careers.
Yeah, those internships or year in industry programs, I mean, that's just such a fabulous way of giving them something to apply their learning to, and sort of test it out and get a sense for what it might be like to work in that industry or stay in that industry.
Yeah, and I think I've been involved quite heavily with the intern programs, both in Cytiva and prior to that into healthcare life sciences. And I wanted to pick up on something that Ashley said about the soft skills, because of course when you're recruiting at that level, either at an apprentice level, so much younger, or at an intern level. In the UK, an intern is usually someone who is either still doing their first degree, so there will be probably about 19, maybe 20, or they've just finished their first degree, and we will take them on for a full year. And that's where we can really look at those soft skills, actually. So very often, one of my interview questions, when you're trying to find out how people deal with the pressurized situations that they're going to encounter, during, for example, to see whether they could have the potential to become a good project manager, ask them about their experience, dealing with a huge queue when they were serving behind the counter in McDonald's. Ask them about their dealing with difficult customers waiting behind a bar, and that's where you can pick up on those soft skills. You don't necessarily have to be pushing hard on their academic qualifications. That's there on a piece of paper. But if as we try to do, bring in that diverse workforce who have the potential to build into good employees by having those soft skills, that's a good place to start, is with that sort of recruitment at that level.
My own view is that we need to start earlier to even raising the possibility of working in sciences. And, one of the reasons I set up Form the Future was I had no idea what jobs were out there when I was growing up. I knew what my mom and dad did. And, obviously you see your teachers, but, I'd never met someone who worked in the sciences, and I still remember a fabulous paper I wrote on schizophrenia, nature or nurture. And, and yet no one ever said, are you interested in this? Do you want to go further? There are jobs out there where you can actually keep doing this sort of thing. So that's my own drive. I don't know, Ashley, has it improved in the States since I was a child? Are you engaging at an earlier age?
Yeah, and those were going to be my comments. I think that we have definitely embraced the need to educate earlier or expose earlier students, and I'm talking about students kindergarten through the 12th grade to careers. And one of the ways that we have found the most success, sort of the multiplier effect, is really educating teachers about careers. In our school system here locally, they have really embraced project-based learning, which obviously allows teachers to work cross-functionally, English teachers with science teachers, and they're all sort of working towards one project, which gets at some of those soft skills that we're talking about, but also just opens up a world of exposure for different types of careers. And from an economic development perspective, we've taken real ownership over the need to connect businesses in our K through 12 school system. We find that our technical colleges and our universities tend to be well connected, though they can stand to have better connections as well from time to time. But there's a gap between the connection between businesses and K-12. And Jackie, as you're alluding to, I think that companies recognize that the investments are important, but they're not always sure how to direct those things. And as a business, you're getting asked 100 times a day to do something for somebody. And so it starts to feel overwhelming. And so, we've taken on a role of kind of acting as a filter or a matchmaker, so to speak, to help companies connect with students. And I'll reference our skills study that we did. Again, one of the questions that we ask is, what's a good way to expose prospective talent to your industry? And the number one answer is through internships and apprenticeships. But then the next question is, how likely are you to implement those things? And the answer is not very likely. And so there's a real perception challenge there and some perceived barriers to some of these internships and apprenticeships, especially when you're talking about bringing in students who may be 16, 17, or 18. And those are the ages where we really need to sort of capture them and start to direct them. And, I think Gwen, you got to this, but these are young people, right? And so part of recruitment success and then retention success is having employees who were bought into your culture. Here, at least, it's the culture wars, who's got the best company culture. And if you're bringing them in early, they don't know anything different. So they're learning your company culture. They're really sort of living and breathing for the company. And then if they're in turn investing in their skills development and sort of a longer progression of who they are as people and employees, that's where we really see some magic happening, right? But what a lot of coordination that all takes. And so I think it's interesting who all was on the panel today, because I feel like you're getting each aspect of the total pipeline. But yeah, we've seen that K through 12 engagement is huge for career exposure and understanding.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I know that AstraZeneca does really well is sends their existing apprentices out as ambassadors to talk to other potential prospective apprentices. And, young people listen to other young people in a completely different way to the way they listen to, me or, anyone who looks like they could be their parents' age. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. Jackie, do you want to say something about the sort of outreach work that you guys do?
Yeah, no, I mean, we do that. And actually, it's a bit of a win-win, because it's part of the apprentices' competency development as well. So it's good for them, because it means they have to go out and develop their presentation, their communication skills. But you're absolutely right, Anne. I think they relate to an age group which is quite close to them quite often in a totally different way. So I do think that's really important. And the other thing I just wanted to comment on is that you've been talking about the importance of getting them early, effectively. I think life sciences has another challenge, though, that is a little bit beyond that, which is also getting a more diverse group in the door. And this is an issue generally for sciences, I think, because if you look at the number of sort of Black and ethnic minority coming through, well, actually even into universities to do first degrees, and then of course the number who go on and do PhDs as well is even smaller. So that's where I think we do have to start earlier. There's a more sort of fundamental issue there. Because diversity and inclusion is very important to us. Diversity of thought, it's key to the innovation process. And if however good we become in our recruitment practices, if the pool isn't there to start with, we can't draw on it. So I think there is a responsibility there for us to go out into the sort of STEM outreach world and actually be very, very visible to some of those individual groups as well.
Yeah. Well, I really wanted to explore that, sort of that idea, the perception, how is the industry perceived? Because if, people think it's all just, men in white coats, boffins and or nerds, is it going to be attracting the diverse skill set, the diverse range of people, the people who actually reflect your customers, because ultimately, we want to have everyone represented in the creative process, in the development, in the all the different roles involved in the life sciences industry. Let alone the fact that just I don't know, I'm a big social justice warrior here, so we need to make sure everyone is getting access to these great opportunities. These are great careers, and the point you were making earlier, Ashley, about what you're seeing coming through on the skills is that sort of really, that sort of the value being put on empathy, diversity, what you said, the sort of human skills side, part of that comes from this diversity of experience, isn't it?
Yes, it's a real challenge. Jackie's so right. You're asked to have goals and efforts around diversity and inclusion, and you can't diversify a pipeline that's not diverse. And so, that goes back to the question of exposure and how early you're starting and making sure You know, for us, it's ensuring that our underserved populations are receiving access to the same exposure opportunities and education opportunities. You know, we're very in the research triangle because we have all of these universities, much like where you all are, you know, we're resource rich in that regard, but the access is not the same. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion are all parts of our strategy. And it's not an easy conversation to have a lot of times. But I've seen, especially in the last 2 years, a real increase in efforts from our companies. Sure, they've had efforts for a while and they're growing, but also from our education providers to really understand their role at all levels for exposure to for all students, equal access. And it can be a challenge, but I feel like at least where we are right now, it feels like we're finally all kind of tracking in a similar direction, which I think will pay off for us. But it's a play to a parade, not a crowd kind of topic. It's not something that ever, you know, is going to be checked off and solved. But I think as companies become more competitive, as we're going to see an increase in life science, certainly companies and types over the next several years. Part of companies' abilities to stay competitive is going to be figuring out how to take full advantage of the workforce. And so that includes populations that they may not have recruited from before, or embracing new training models that bring in different types of employees. So we're seeing some companies start to really step outside the box. And I think it's going to become even more creative as we go along to solve for some of these things.
I also think that there were so many points I wanted to pick up on, but before I go on to the global aspect of it, and maybe we need to start being more diverse in our thinking in terms of where we're actually based and recruiting from. I wanted to pick up on something about Jackie said about the outreach program. I've been very lucky for the last few years to be able to work with our interns when they go to the Cheltenham Science Festival. So we do the same, Jackie. We use our interns to go do our outreach, and it is an amazing experience to stand there and see the, as you say, Ashley, those sort of year 12, 13, maybe even year 10 and 11 students talking to interns. And just last year, you know, to hear one young girl student say to one of our interns, I didn't know that you could, you know, like you could be a scientist. So she was looking at somebody who looked exactly like her, and she didn't know that you could be a scientist if you looked like her. And it was just a real moment. But I think we on this panel here, we're looking at people based in the UK and the States, and one of the things we're looking at is we're seeing a lot of governments and countries now looking, particularly after COVID, okay, how can we recruit and build our life science industry in our country, because we are going to need to make sure we're prepared for the next time that we have the scientists here. And I think that's where particularly global companies like AstraZeneca and Cytiva can again step up and make sure that we're not just US can centric, that we are looking to India, we're looking to China, we're looking to Latin America, the rest of Asia, and saying, you know, let's recruit, but not recruit and bring people to Europe or bring people to US can. Let's build up our resources, and then we can share around, and then that's going to help build a more diverse industry as well.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that, Nikki. Actually, I recently talked to an analytical company in India just on that very subject. They were just sort of wanting to sort of pick my brains about UK apprenticeships and how they work, and they were interested in doing something very similar. And what was striking about that was actually, whilst things aren't the same, there's actually a lot of government incentives there as well for education, and a lot of ability to access that kind of funding to support. So I think you're absolutely right. We need to sort of, you know, think around the edges a bit more and sort of beyond the borders.
Yeah, we're looking with our India-based colleagues with how do we work with the Indian government funded websites where they direct university students to these particular websites, which would have links to training from companies such as AstraZeneca, such as Cytiva. So the government themselves is making the bridge between academic institutes and the life science companies, but that they can direct them and say, okay, you want a career in life sciences, you come here, and then you can see training that's from life science companies.
I mean, it is very much got to be all the players, doesn't it? It is public, private, it's government, academia, industry, Gwen, the sort of things that you were talking about that MediWales is doing already, it's just more and more of that, isn't it? No one institution or sector or organization is going to solve this on its own. It's got to take a joint effort. Do you want to come in on that, Quinn?
I think so. I was just pondering that the mix of that joint effort, because I mean, yes, it is fabulous what Cytiva and AstraZeneca are able to do, and getting the interns and the apprentices to go out and talk to the school kids just sounds like a great initiative to me. I really do understand how that works. Where we find a challenge is with the smaller companies. They might have fewer people, to be honest, less bandwidth to do things that are supportive. And although everybody agrees that reaching people younger, reaching the kids younger to promote the STEM subjects when they're still selecting their courses, instead of trying to pick them off at the graduate and the student, where a lot of the decisions have already been made. Everybody agrees that it's essential. Everybody agrees that it's right for the health of our sector in the future. But putting company resource into encouraging children who won't actually be in the workforce for another up to 10 years is a big commitment. And I think that's where our governments, our academic institutions, and maybe some of our bigger companies can provide initiatives that I know the small businesses would like to engage with if they felt that some of the heavy lifting had been done for them.
I think that's absolutely right. I'll let you go in, Jackie, but I think it's also that, still the bulk of the industry, life sciences sector in the UK is made up of small SMEs. And, so they outnumber the large players considerably, and they are under different pressures. The only thing I would go back to, and, I always encourage people to reflect on what Jackie just said, it's actually part of the outreach is actually training for the employee. And there are skills development that can take place by getting involved in these experiences, or just simply the sense of well-being and feel good from having, being part of a company that does invest in doing this. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, doesn't have to cost anything, but it actually can pay back in terms of sense of satisfaction. And we all need that. We work so hard that we do need to feel occasionally like, you've just got that sort of pat on the back from doing a good job, doing a good deed. But anyway, Jackie, you wanted to come in on this.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of mention the importance of networks, I think, within the sector. This is where I think, to your point, Gwyn, actually the bigger companies can help the smaller ones. So, the Science Industry Partnership's been doing some of that in apprenticeships, where trying to kind of, because actually, you're right, I mean, it's really hard for smaller companies to get them set up, frankly. It's a bit of a minefield. It's administratively quite complex, and so the incentive is not really there to do it. So actually just kind of helping them along the way, sharing the benefit of experience, can be really useful, and that's an area I think where sort of government sort of focusing funding on that really would help drive up some sort of apprenticeship uptake into SMEs.
Ashley, is the government stepping in and subsidizing any of this sort of activity in the US?
Yes, and I think along the lines of apprenticeships specifically, we've seen some evolutions with apprenticeships specifically as it relates to how the program functions. So apprenticeships lived with our Department of Labor for a very long time. They now live with our community college system, which has made them on the whole a lot more accessible and affordable. There's some bandwidth there that did not exist before. And so obviously that comes with some government funding. You know, I wanted to sort of add, Gwen makes a great point about about smaller companies, and you know, to the point that I was making about the multiplier effect with educating teachers about careers. One thing that we've seen our school system do here, and we have a very large public school system, there's over 175,000 students enrolled in our public schools. And so bandwidth becomes an issue for them, but they did something interesting a few years ago where they made a commitment to give each teacher a short-term exposure to a company. And by short-term, I mean 2 or 3 hours. And we help them with this, but every single teacher is placed in a business. So even companies that are 1 or 2 people in size think, okay, I can do that. You know, I can take 2 hours versus some of these other things that really feel like a heavy lift for them. And it's amazing at what just 2 hours in a business can do for a teacher who's just trying to understand how a business works. What's happening behind those doors? How does this relate to my students? And so we've seen some sort of creative things like that, that it's small. Does it totally meet the need? Probably not. But does it get their minds going in a different direction and give them something to work with? It does. And it gives them equal access to companies of all size, and it doesn't cost them anything. So I just want to throw that in as an example of some things that we've seen that move the needle a little bit.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I totally love the idea of really helping open the teacher's eyes to the possibilities out there. And I deal with teachers all the time, and they often lack confidence, you know, because they feel, I only know teaching. I came straight from school to university into another school again, and I don't know what happens out there. So, you know, just helping them, you know, learn a little bit more about what it is happening. And particularly as we're talking about change, you know, a sector that's under tremendous change, you know, I'm sure teachers are not thinking you need to be an IT expert to work in the life sciences sector. You know, they won't see the digital skills or the sort of soft skills point that we've been talking about so much, the team working, the collaboration, the interdisciplinary nature of the work, sales and marketing, you know, all of those opportunities. So yes, let's all try to get the government to invest more in supporting this and priming it and driving it, encourage the engagement of businesses, because there is something to be said, and keep the schools open to the possibilities of doing more to prepare young people. I want to just turn to, we're coming towards the end, but I wanted to really explore this topic of COVID-19. It's been a heck of a year for all of us, and no more so than in the life sciences sector. So I'm wondering, has there been an upside to COVID-19 in terms of changing the perception of the sector, getting people more excited about it, curious about it? You know, we talked earlier, you know, we started with some of the challenges, but we also saw that there's opportunity. Can we talk about that a bit?
Well, I'll jump in there. So, I mean, we've never had a situation before where the majority of our population understand what PPE is and stands for, understands tracking and tracing in the digital world, and is fairly skilled in terms of understanding diagnostics. So I think we probably are in a time when our industry is more transparent to the rest of the world than ever before. So hopefully that will result in some benefits. But the other thing I was just going to mention about the COVID-19 situation is people working from home. It's been a challenge. It's been a struggle for some people. I mean, there are some well-being issues, but on the other hand, it's helped us escape from presenteeism. And I've been so pleased with a lot of colleagues and people I've worked with who've who've instead of struggling to just be at their desk for the 9 to 5 that they are contracted, they've actually turned themselves to far more into getting the job done, getting the project completed. And no, you don't have to supervise people in order to motivate them to get their work done. So I'd say that's a positive I'd like to keep hold of.
Yeah, a positive I've seen is, apologies for jumping in, but it's exactly that, is that I can only speak for the life science sector, but along with the accelerated development, research and development for the vaccine, and you know, we're there, and what a wonderful place to be that we've achieved it, but also all of the side projects, and for example the diagnostic projects. So even within our own company, we've seen people just be so open-minded, and reaching across the sharing across the industry. AstraZeneca being a fantastic shining example of that. You know, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, help us, tell us what we're doing, you know, let's share. But we see it not only on the vaccine development, but also on the research and the development of diagnostics. And I think if we can hang on to that, it can only have a positive impact on all other parts of life science research and development.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think the other thing we touched on working from home, but we've all learned to work in a virtual world. And I think, you know, at the point that we went into the first lockdown, we were just a week away from all of our assessment centres for the graduate scheme, and we had to sort of turn it all on a dime and make it virtual. And we thought, how on earth are we going to do that? And it's not going to work, and it's all going to, and actually it was a resounding success. And there's a lot of that even for the future, when we are back to normal, we will take away, and we will do some of that stuff virtually in the future. We had a Keep Warm event for the apprentices and their parents over the summer. Again, normally we would do that locally, face to face. We couldn't do that. We ran it a whole UK event over Zoom with breakout rooms, but actually the benefit of that was that suddenly every area of the company that hosted apprentices came together. And so the exposure for the apprentices and their parents was on a different level. And again, we would do it that way again. So I think, you know, that opportunity to learn has been huge. And I would also say that applications are up across all of our sort of schemes. So that, I think, speaks to, yes, there is an upside.
Yeah, and I think the word there, that us being forced into this virtual world has given us all, is access. Some barriers that existed to jobs, internships, apprenticeships, like transportation, childcare, become less of a burden when suddenly there is an online or virtual option. There's still a lot of work to be done, at least for us, in terms of broadband access, and there's an equity question in there too. But we've seen some real positive outcomes for just access and a little bit more of an even playing field for those who want these opportunities. And so I love the way you phrased the question, what's the positive takeaway? I think I love to talk about the positive, and I think that has been one.
Yeah, and actually, you know, we're coming to the end of our hour together, and so it's always nice to end on a positive note. Obviously, COVID has had terrible damage, but there could be an upside, that it's got people more interested in careers in the life science. It's opened up the opportunities to participate in careers in life science. And actually, I think we all know that with our aging population, we're going to need to continue to be developing, growing, and investing in life sciences. And that's where the jobs will be and the opportunities will be. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for taking part today. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you all. I think it was a good mix, and interesting to see how much common ground there is across the different sides of the Atlantic Ocean. So I think that's it. We'll wrap it up there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much again, everyone, for such an interesting discussion and for sharing your thoughts. I hope that everybody who dialed in on the day enjoys it just as much too. I'm sure they will. Yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.